Last year, Street Fighter 6 would become a fighting game that would take the world by storm. However, it would be the quirky, often forgotten Street Fighter EX that would first bring the franchise to the realm of polygonal gaming. While not even closely talked about as much as other Street Fighter entries, the paradigm shift to polygons was part of a popular trend in fighting games due to the rise of the likes of Virtua Fighter, Tekken, Dead or Alive, Bloody Roar and Soul Blade. Looking to further capitalise off of the success of Street Fighter 2, moving into the next generation, Street Fighter EX will be a game for the 32-bit Sony PlayStation. But sadly, with Street Fighter EX arriving late to the party in December 1996, the game wouldn't even make close to the same mark on history as its contemporaries. Drowning in a sea of Sony PlayStation fighting games, carrying the Street Fighter name was not enough for Street Fighter EX to stand out, even if it did manage to bring the characters we loved, as well as a few amazing new ones, to the next dimension. So, bearing in mind that the title's very existence was based around the franchise's polygonal push on newer hardware, then why the bloody hell does a version of this blocky brawler exist on the Super Nintendo of all platforms? Well, let's find out. Hello ladies and gentlemen, Big Daddy Top Hat here. This is the illegal 16-bit version of Street Fighter EX. Yeah. Street Fighter, Street Fighter, Street Fighter. These games are freaking amazing, aren't they? Stand amongst the most influential titles in history. Who couldn't love these games? What's all the more amazing is that to this day we can continue to enjoy lots of these greats on modern hardware. Street Fighter 4, 5 and 6 can all currently be enjoyed on Steam, not to mention the huge 30th anniversary collection containing 12 classic games. What's better is that thanks to today's sponsor, I can offer you all of these titles at insanely reduced rates. Our sponsor, Instant Gaming, distinguishes itself by offering us with the opportunity to procure video games at insanely low prices. After all, if you are getting a digital copy of a game, shouldn't it be much cheaper than physical as there are no manufacturing costs? Well, we think so too. Instant Gaming is 100% legit because they get all of their keys directly from the source, offering authenticity without compromise. In terms of their deals on Street Fighter games, some of these are crazy. We can download Ultra Street Fighter 4 for less than $2.50, a price that is 92% cheaper than on Steam, but bargains don't stop there. We can get 49% off the deluxe edition of Street Fighter 6, 82% off Street Fighter 5, and a whopping 78% off of the anniversary collection I mentioned earlier. That's a lot of Street Fighter games at prices cheaper than you are going to pay anywhere else. So for your convenience, I've posted direct links to all of them in the description down below. So if you want to save some money on video games and of course support what I do as well, click the links down in the description. Once there, it will take a few minutes to create an account and you can then make those games yours. Happy shopping, people. One game you will not be able to procure through this service is the obscure oddity we will be focusing on today. But let's be honest, is this for the better? Let's explore it and how this game no one asked for came about. Street Fighter and bootleg products have never been strangers from one another. In fact, a strong case could be made that the fact unlicensed Street Fighter games exists fed into the overall success of the official releases. The illegal arcade ROM known as Rainbow Edition would wow players back in the day for the implementation of allowing players to throw multiple fireballs at once, change out characters at will, and increase the play speed of the action. It was the fun of this increased play speed that would inspire Capcom to release the now beloved Street Fighter 2 Turbo Hyper Fighting. But Rainbow Edition was far from the only Street Fighter 2 bootleg to come from Taiwan. While official Street Fighter 2 iterations would find success on the Super Nintendo, it would take the Taiwanese development group known as Hummer Team to bring the experience over to the NES. This ensured that those who lived in less affluent portions of the world could still enjoy an illegal version of Street Fighter 2 on their 8-bit hardware. In fact, such an endeavour proved so successful that it would spawn the same developers to make their own editions of various popular 16-bit games, bringing the likes of Super Mario World and Link to the Past amongst many others to the Super Nintendo as well. Remaking 16-bit games as 8-bit ones may be very challenging, but the graphical style between games of these two eras remains similar enough for it to be easy to comprehend how such conversions would work. But bringing a polygonal intensive PlayStation game over to the humble Super Nintendo, well, that's another story. How on earth was anyone going to pull off getting Street Fighter EX to run on the Super NES? Well, the truth is, not very well at all, my dear chums, as it's incredibly hard to ignore the flagrant discrepancies between this title and the source material. Let's start by marvelling at the ostentatious display of a Street Fighter EX Plus A logo, a moniker shared with its illustrious Sony PlayStation counterpart. That version of the game actually featured a few bells and whistles not present in the original arcade game, but as you can probably guess, the Super Nintendo didn't bring such additions to the table. Upon venturing into the realm of character selection, one cannot help but observe the blatant recycling of fighter portraits from the EX edition. Oh, and pray do behold the rather crude attempt at replicating the character select background. A feeble effort indeed when compared to the bold and vibrant backdrop of its PlayStation counterpart, which pulsated with psychedelic allure. Admittedly, the Super Nintendo rendition attempts a similar feat, albeit with a discernible disparity in execution. Furthermore, one simply cannot overlook the egregious differences in roster composition, with a mere duo of newcomers from the EX realm gracing the SNES offering. The absence of the illustrious ensemble found in its PlayStation counterpart is striking, with just Skullomania and Hokuto standing as solitary beacons amidst a sea of familiar faces, playable in other bootleg Street Fighter games. To add insult to injury, Akuma, that elusive hidden character found in many Street Fighter games, assumes a prominent role from the outset. Oh, the travesty of it all. An intriguing quirk unfolds in this game. Your choice of protagonist dictates your initial adversary, as another character's portrait is illuminated in correspondence to your selection. Curious, isn't it? Nevertheless, let's delve into the heart of the matter, the action.
Round, fight!
Oh my word, this is quite appalling! Hilariously atrocious, if I may say so. It appears that miscreants behind this endeavour spared no effort to concoct a polygonal rendition of Street Fighter EX for the Super Nintendo, but instead we are subjected to a dubious sprite-based affair, complete with stagnant backgrounds shamelessly pilfered from the genuine Street Fighter EX. One cannot help but marvel at the audacity of these bootleggers. Yet, let us not forget this brazen manoeuvre is not unprecedented. Cast your mind back to 1994, when Sega shamelessly perpetrated a similar act of chicanery when they released a dodgy cash grab version of Virtua Fighter 2 for the underpowered Sega Genesis. A game, I might add, that Sega of Japan wanted to push so hard that they would altogether cancel Sega of America's successful Eternal Champions franchise to ensure that it never stole the Sega Genesis's Virtua Fighter 2 thunder. So, as much as we can criticise this Street Fighter EX game, at least it's not an official abomination like the Mega Drive's Virtua Fighter 2. It's a travesty that they leveraged the esteemed Virtua Fighter name to peddle an inferior product. While Virtua Fighter 2 on Sega's 16-bit contraption was undoubtedly ghastly, I must begrudgingly confess that Street Fighter EX for the Super Nintendo is an even greater affront to sensibilities. Upon the first strains of hearing the game's music, a discerning ear will instantly detect the wholesale pilfering of all the music and sound effects from Street Fighter 2. However, the similarities to the seminal classic cease there. As for matters of combat, one may detect faint echoes of Street Fighter 2, yet the execution is woefully lacking in both finesse and fluidity. To compound the misery, akin to the most rudimentary of 8-bit diversions, the entire experience is navigated through naught but a simplistic 2-button control scheme, one for kicks and the other for punches, which is a complete joke considering that this is a remake of a 32-bit game made to run on 16-bit hardware. Even for a bootleg, we should have been beyond 2-button control schemes by now. In regards to these controls, although certain special maneuvers are feasible, requiring deft joystick manipulations paired with precise button inputs, they pale in comparison to their illustrious forebearers. Taking this into account, you might worry that super moves will be difficult to execute, but fear not, most super moves do not exist within this dreary affair, albeit a couple are accessible only when the super meter reaches its zenith. A meagre consolation in an otherwise insipid spectacle, I dare say. So, if one is to play the lamentable Street Fighter EX for the Super Nintendo, if one finds themselves embroiled in its clutches, a sense of deja vu may indeed wash over them. akin to the familiarity one might encounter when traversing the realm of other bootleg fighting games on the platform. This eerie sensation owes itself to the fact that this particular creation shares an identical fighting game engine with many of its contemporaries, including the questionable X-Men vs Street Fighter, a dubious specimen we scrutinised in the past on here. Amongst the litany of shared characteristics among these titles, the act of combat within this realm is further marred by the curious irregularities of its hitboxes, abysmal hit detection, and the frame rate so abhorrently low it could well induce migraines. Add to this the disconcertingly floaty jumps, then smooth animation becomes a rarity indeed. Street Fighter EX for the Super Nintendo exhibits the same jarring qualities as its dubious brethren, much to the dismay of enthusiasts seeking out these oddities. Rumours abound within the gaming circles attributing the creation of this disgusting fighting engine point to DVS Electronics, a company hailing from the shores of Taiwan. While not formally credited with the development of Street Fighter EX, it seems highly probable that they are the nefarious architects behind its unholy creation. But while we have all these complaints about the gameplay itself, maybe we can find some love within our black hearts for the characters, right? Well, not very likely. Full of glaring inconsistencies within this wretched game, certain character sprites appear more suspect than others, with poor Guile resembling a knockoff purchase from the depths of Wish. And alas, the disappointment doesn't end there, for Skullomania fails to bear much resemblance to his namesake at all. A lack of effort which in my opinion was a grievous misstep considering how enjoyed this cult character is. It would have been great to see this fighter represented well here, especially considering that he is not present in any official 2D Street Fighter installments. Moving on to covering more characters, M. Bison, the nefarious antagonist, assumes the mantle of the game's final hurdle. Yet upon his defeat, one is rewarded with naught but an underwhelming message proclaiming, "Congratulations, you are number one."
We are number one!
A wry sentiment indeed, for one must possess unparalleled fortitude to enjoy the entirety of this dismal excursion. Undoubtedly, the official incarnations of Street Fighter EX failed to make a significant impact, with these polygonal pioneers lacking the innovation required to thrive in a landscape dominated by the likes of the mighty Tekken series. Yet, as mediocre as Street Fighter EX performed, the Super Nintendo iteration of the game doesn't even deign to replicate the meagre virtues of its predecessors. Instead, it shamelessly endeavours to capitalise on a sub-franchise that never quite captured the zeitgeist. The allure of this aberration, if any, lies in its curiosity of witnessing Street Fighter EX on 16-bit Nintendo hardware. Alas though, the cold hard reality falls far short of expectations, offering us nothing but a banal experience no different from the myriad of other Super Nintendo fighting game bootlegs. Oh, the disappointment. But at least it was worth our time to mock today, right? Anyway, if you fancy downloading some excellent Street Fighter games at bargain bucket prices, do not forget you can use my instant gaming links via the pinned comments. You might want to cleanse your Street Fighter palette by playing these now, or if you're a sadist, you might want to check out my previous upload on the illegal 8-bit Street Fighter alpha game. Yes, that exists too. Cheerio.